Okay, I'll wait a bit. I think now it's good. So, primeiramente, bem-vindos. And now I'll be speaking only in English. So, our second speaker of the day is Luis Fong. He earned his major degree in physics engineering from the Monterey Institute of Technology and Higher Studies, and his PhD in experimental biophysics from Vanderbilt University. In 2008, he completed his medical physics fellowship at Mayo Clinic and then joined the Department of Radiation Oncology as an assistant professor of medical physics. He is the chair of physics clinical practice and co-chair of the Quality and Safety Committee. His primary research interest is the assessment of radiation oncology information systems, analysis and optimization of clinical processes, and safety and error mitigation strategies. He holds board certification from the American Board of Radiology in the subfield of therapeutic radiological physics, and he presents a bronze level certification from Mayo Clinic Quality Academy. He's a member of the AAPM work group on prevention of errors in radiation oncology and has participated in multiple AAPM projects and test groups in the area of quality and safety in radiotherapy. So I'd like to thank you for accepting the invitation, and I would also like to give you the floor for you to start your lecture.
Thank you, Guillermo. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody and thank you for the organizers for inviting me to give or participate in this meeting. It is an honor and pleasure to share some of the things that I learned. What I would love to be with all of you because that is easier for me, but I know that it's not possible now. So I'm going to be talking about image guidance in radiation therapy, an overview of this topic. If anybody of you has any questions, please use the comment sections, and I will try to address them as good as possible. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity. So let me start here. So as you know, the overall goal of radiation therapy is, okay, well, we have a tumor, and we want to give the maximum amount of dose and give the minimum amount of dose to healthy organs. So if we were able to drop dose exactly on the tumors, as we do with radioactive sources, well, that would be the best because we are just right on the tumor. However, that's an invasive procedure. So we tend to use external beam to irradiate the tumor and try to spare some of the critical organs around the tumor. So if we were able to maximize the tumor dose and minimize the dose to the healthy organs, that's the overall goal of radiotherapy. However, as you can imagine, there are some challenges. I mean, this is the representation of a person, and unfortunately, we cannot right away see what's going on inside the person's body. That's the idea. We were able to see what is inside of the person's body. We were able to actually really localize where the target is and actually just place the radiation exactly where the tumor is. So a solution that we can propose is like, well, why don't we invent some super X-ray vision that you can put on and actually see what's going on inside the patient. Actually, you can Google this. You can actually find these glasses, and you can get them for apparently $1. So that might be the solution to our problems. We equip you with a X-ray gun, and then you are ready to kill cancer. So that would be the nice and easy solution. However, you can imagine that is not that simple. So one of the technologies that has evolved in order to allow us to localize targets and try to minimize doses to healthy organs is the concept of image-guided radiation therapy. In other words, it's called IGRT. And IGRT has several cycles. I mean, you have a more broader cycle from clinical objective, therapy design, intervention, all the way to monitoring. You have the traditional IGRT that happens during the treatment. However, I think during this lecture, I'm going to be talking about all of the aspects of image guidance, because I think each component plays an important role on trying to optimize the overall radiation therapy process. So during the therapy design, we have a target volume of definition. During the intervention, we have the pre-treatment detection and correction, which help us monitor the interfraction changes as well as the intrafraction changes. In other words, changes that happen during the fraction, during the time that we are delivering the dose, as well as changes that happen as the treatment is progressing. As you know, radiation therapy it is given in many little chunks, or we call fractions, and we can see the progression of our delivery by seeing the interfraction changes. And we can also think about, well, we completed our treatment, and what happened after that. We can assess adaptation and response of our treatment to the patient overall care and tumor and healthy organs. So this is what I'm going to be concentrating on, trying to describe the different cycles across the radiation therapy process and the role of IGRT on each of them. So when radiotherapy was created, I think, and image guidance was initiated, one of the main things that we wanted to understand is purely geometric registrations. Okay, how can we try to target the target better and have improved quality? With improving quality, we improve how much dose we can give. With improving better imaging, we can reduce toxicities, increase the number of reduce the number of treatments or the number of fractions. We can visualize better what happened at each individual pixel of an image, and we can think about adaptation. In other words, we can think about how we can change the plan on the fly to better target the tumor. As these technologies and things are progressing now, we're thinking about narrowing it down and actually make this more personable and actually try to see, can we modify all of these techniques, technologies, and use all of this information to target individual patient needs. And we are not there yet, but I think that's where we want to be, and using all of the information that we have at the multiple stages of the radiotherapy process to actually be able to personalize the radiotherapy process to that specific patient needs. That's the future, and I can tell you that we are not there yet. We are going there, but I think some of you who are studying medical physics, some of you might be interested on going in that direction, and I can tell you that there are many opportunities in many domains to go in that direction. So this is an area of opportunities in the radiotherapy field. So let's start with our journey. Let's start with target volume definition. So in order to get into that space, I think we need to understand the evolution of imaging overall in medicine. And you can think about from the 1900s, where the X-rays were discovered and used to just see planar images, to the development of techniques like ultrasound, PET, MRI, CT, interventional ultrasound, and now we started to combine CT and PET. We were more specialized about MR and the use of magnetic resonance. We were able to actually use more high spatial resolution CT techniques to see things that are very small and actually between cavities. So you can see that the evolution of imaging has progressed considerably for the last 100 years. So it's incredible the amount of things that we have developed in this amount of time since the discovery of the X-rays for the use of imaging for medicine. So now with all of this information, we can be more specific. We can detect areas and see how the tumor is progressing and what are the specific microenvironments of the tumor to target different types of treatments to treat cancer. So as you can imagine, an enhancement of CT was the discovery of MR, and you can see that MR provides a much better contrast resolution that you cannot see with CT. So this has helped us to target and the tumors much better. The invention of PET-CT has made a considerably difference in terms of overall improvement on accuracy for detection and delineation of cancers. About this slide just showed that it was a 10 to 15% improvement on overall detection of cancers. And you can see that for every single one of them, there is an improving accuracy that is actually considerable. So the invention and the bringing of this new modality has really improved the first part of the image guidance process, which is diagnosis and target delineation. So with only CT, you can see that if a physician wanted to contour what they consider is the tumor, this is a study that shows how there is the variation of multiple physicians saying, okay, well, I'm giving you this image. I want you to contour what is the target. And this is the standard deviation between all of those physicians. By bringing a new modality like PET-CT, you can see that the standard deviation of contouring is improved considerably. Now we give this task to the physicians. Now they are able to actually target what seems to be the tumor rather than if we only provide the CT information. So you can see that the importance of the development of new imaging modalities for target delineation has made a considerable improvement on targeting more specifically areas that we want to treat and areas that we want to avoid treating. It also has helped to not just target the specific area that is considered the tumor, but target areas that are potentially at higher risk for response. So if you wanted to increase the dose to a specific section, there are different tracers that can tell you more information about the tumor microenvironment. So physicians can have a better assessment and possibly give more dose to a specific section of the tumor to improve the overall response and the likelihood of patient being cured by the radiation. So it doesn't just help you delineate the target, but now it can give you information of the heterogeneities within the target in order to improve the overall outcome of the treatments. So those are some ideas and some things that have been improvement on what is considered target volume definition and defining the clinical objective. So I think as you can see, there is being considerable amount of improvements in that area, just because the progression and the development of new imaging modalities that have been invented or developed by very good physicists, and it might be maybe some of you might develop new modalities and new techniques that can help us target tumors better. So now let's talk a little bit more about what happened during this part of the image guidance cycle, which is the intervention. And in order to do that, we need to talk a little bit about the advancements on the radiation therapy process. And you can see that this was an X-ray system that was used to treat something very superficial, and you can see that the patient was holding some sort of compensator to target the specific section to be treated. When the invention of linear accelerators came to be, you can see that this was one that was used to treat also patients. Then there was the inclusion of, okay, well, why don't we, instead of having a big device, why don't we make it smaller with cobalt unit, with cobalt system, and some of these units are still on the market to actually treat patients. This is one more kind of radiation, a linear accelerator that was a little bit smaller in size compared to this. And now new modalities now have something smaller than it can be fitted into a relatively small bunker, and they have technologies for not just delivering the dose, but also for defining apertures. And now we can actually move these apertures to modulate the beam as the treatment is progressing on that fraction, to try to spare healthy organs and actually put more dose on the areas that we need to put dose. So you can see that the progression, again, from the 1900s all the way to now, it's been also considerable in the type of radiation therapy treatments that have been developed. So with that, we have also in parallel incorporated different imaging modalities that are part of the radiation therapy process. For example, you have ultrasound guided therapy, we have KV radiographic images, we have improved the use of what we consider portal dosimetry, which is a detector that measures the exit dose or exit dose coming from the linear accelerator, so you can actually produce an image with that. We have developed markers made of gold or some other active markers like the Calypso, where it can actually tell you where specifically the tumor is. We have incorporated other more sophisticated modalities like a CT on rails, the tomotherapy, which uses the delivery beam to deliver the radiation as well as to take the images, and the traditional linear accelerator, where you have the X-rays coming out of the linac and the image-guided systems coupled in a perpendicular manner to take either planar images or volumetric images. So you can see that it's been a considerable evolution of the delivery technology, as well as the image guidance or target localization technologies with the progression of these systems. So as I mentioned, one of the most common now used system is the KV radiograph or fluoro for guidance. As I described to you, you have your linear accelerator, and that delivers the dose, and you have diagnostic X-ray sources with a panel primarily localized perpendicular to the beam and attached to the gantry, so the source and the imager moves with the gantry, or in other geometries where you have the X-ray generator and linear accelerator mobile, and you have the X-ray source for imaging and the detector just fixed in the room. So that is, you move the patient around to align it based on these fixed images. So that's the only geometry that you have to take images. In this case, you have multiple angles that you can take images, and this allows for what is well, this is the type of images that it shows. Again, it's just a planar image compared to what is called DRR, which is your reference images for localization. With those technologies, we can go a step further, and the next thing is to say, well, can we do volumetric imaging? And as I was describing to you, you can incorporate a CT on rails on the room, meaning that you have your delivery system as well as a CT in the room, so you can take a full CT scan, localize the patient, bring the patient back to the unit and treat. So that's actually used in my institution. In our proton system, we have incorporated a CT on rails for volumetric imaging. You can have other systems, as I mentioned, where the MV source is the one that actually acquires the imaging, or the KV is actually acquiring a volumetric image. And this is an example of some images that you have. You have, in this case, the reference is not just a planar image, but it's actually a volumetric or 3D volume. so you can see in all directions, in all possible sections of the patient. And it provides not just contrast resolution regarding bone, but you can also start looking at soft tissue, like in example, this long nodule. You can detect it now with volumetric imaging, that if you were only taking KV pairs, the only thing that you have is bones and not soft tissue. Okay, somebody's asking, some IGRT techniques require patient to hold their breath. Is it common to use some tracking machinery to help treatment, like Calypso? Yeah, that's a very good point. As one of the challenges of image guidance during the treatment is motion. And there are different techniques. One of them is to have their patients hold their breath and actually take the image on a breath hold, is called. And actually that produces a very nice image, and that's how sometimes we treat lesions like in the lung, for example. It is a little bit challenging for the patient because in order to take an image, this gantry needs to go all around the patient. And there is a limitation on how fast this gantry can go. So it's 1 revolution per minute. So you can imagine that in order to take an image, the patient will have to hold their breath multiple times. And however, that's done, and we do an assessment during the initial image for the patient for simulation to see if the patient can do that. And that's a common technique used in radiation therapy. There are other ways in which you take images and you can create what is called a 4D, meaning a movie loop of the patients as the patient is breathing. And that's another way to manage motion while you are treating. But you are correct, Renato, that the motion is something that we need to manage both during imaging as well as during treatment. Thank you for that question. What has been the impact of volumetric imaging? I think, as you can see, this is called the residual error, are by improving from just marks on the skin to weekly ports, to the use of ultrasound, to the use of KV planar images, the use of ConFime CT, and the use of ConFime CT with fiducials. And this is just for prostate. You can see that we have improved considerably in the amount of residual error. In other words, what is the position of the patient after imaging when we now have imaging? So you can see that we have gone from a residual error of 6 millimeters to something in the order of 1 millimeter. So that is produce a considerable amount of progress in terms of the management of the tumor with the inclusion of image guidance techniques like ConFime CT and fiducials like just goal markers, or even the Calypso that Renato is mentioning. So this is just an example of the displacement with no image guidance as a function of fraction. And you can see that this is in order of millimeters. So you can see that there is the position of the target can vary between 20, all the way to 2 centimeters relative to how it was on the original scan, on the original image. When only doing offline corrections, we still have a considerable amount of spread. And when we include image guidance, you can see that we do corrections online, meaning before treatment, so we can considerably reduce the residual position of the target using image guidance during treatment. A question sometimes is asked, well, how important this is in terms of, is this helping patients achieve better outcomes? And this is just what is called in prostate biochemical control of 2 arms. When you include image guidance on this analysis, you can see that there is an improvement on that specific outcome. So showing evidence that image guidance is not just a fancy tool, it does provide benefit for the patients in terms of some of the clinical outcomes that we are looking for. So that's good. That's good that we have, and we can improve outcomes by bringing new technologies into the game. So with that, I hope I was able to convey that the section of intervention, which is the management of interfraction and intrafraction motion, we have technologies to improve that, going from different type of images to different type of markers that we can put in the target to track the position of the tumor, and not just the position of the tumor, but the tissue around, or the organs at risk around the tumor better. So what about the next part of the cycle, which is monitoring, and one specific thing, which is adaptation and response. So there are multiple ways of adapting during a treatment. You can do it, okay, we have no adaptation, so we have an intent and a specific treatment plan that we are going to do, and we are just doing the image guidance, and that treatment remains constant as a function of time. There are other strategies. We say, okay, well, there are changes on the anatomy. Offline, we are going to actually adapt the plan to actually make sure that the plan conforms better, or make sure that it is actually sparing the healthy tissue that we want to spare. We can do that as plan, or we can trigger it depending on a specific things that we are seeing. We can do daily adaptations, meaning that we can do changes that happen as a function of one day after the other, or we can actually do what is called real-time adaptation, and that's kind of the state of the art of where radiotherapy is going. And during those times, we can adjust daily. So, and in each fraction, the things that are changing are actually happening at the time of where the patient is actually laying on the table. We can include the intrafraction variations. We need to do bring other techniques like the formable registration to actually make sure that the contours that we are defining there are changing as a function of each fraction. We need to be able to track the dose as a function of these changes on the anatomy, and achieve the real-time adaptation. So you can imagine that that's simple, but I can tell you that there is still quite a big questions about how do we do the planning of the dose, and how do we actually track the actual dose that the patient is receiving as a function of adaptation. So some of the toxicities that we have defined have been defined on a traditional scheme for non-adaptive planning. So maybe we need to rethink the type of toxicities and target on doses of targets as we are adapting, since it's really changing the way we are thinking about delivering radiation therapy. It's more like an interventional procedure where each fraction has new set of information that we use to adapt to the plan. And again, that's a new frontier. There are still things that need to be answered about how this is benefit patients, and if all of this work is really actually improving outcomes. And I can tell you there is quite a bit of research on that space at the moment. Technologies that use this, and two of them that have used a very interesting imaging modality, which is MR, is the system produced by Elekta, and the system produced by Blu-ray, where they were able to have an MR coupled with a LINAC to do online adaptation with volumetric imaging that provides much better contrast resolution. If you can think about a ConFime CT, this is the type of contrast resolution that we see. And if I ask you, well, what is the tumor? You can see that it's kind of difficult to see. If we bring MR, there is no ambiguity of where the tumor is, so we can actually track the position and the shape of the tumor during a specific fraction and each fraction. So this is what MR has brought into the picture in terms of improving overall localization during the fraction and as well as per fraction. So you can imagine that if you can see the target very well, you don't need to have markers. You can actually gate or actually track the tumor during the treatment and actually do adaptive changes or that are related to the tumor position with the inclusion of MR. This is another example on the liver, and you can see that because of this type of technology, it's much easier to see the contrast resolution of the tumor relative to healthy organs like the liver here during the treatment. How to do that? Well, I mean, there are multiple technologies. This is just a workflow that shows how, okay, you have a pre-treatment CT where you have an original plan, you have an MR, you can do the formable registration of all of your structures using the MR, produce an online plan, and actually do the position, do the verification of the dose, and treat the patient, and everything, all of this happens within the same fraction, during the same session of treatment. In order to do that and to actually do that information, there is been the inclusion of a lot of AI technologies for contour recontouring and trying to get and use the information that you have during your initial pre-treatment CT to do adaptation of contours, so we can rapidly create a new plan, assess the dose on those new structures, do a QA, and do the treatment. So AI has played an important role on online adaptive workflows for actually being able to match the time scales that we need, which has to be within the same treatment session. So this is just an example of, this is how the renal plan looks like. This is how the dose of the renal plan looks like in the new anatomy of the day. And this is how a re-optimized plan will look like if we decide that we are going to do a replan on the fly using the information that we have during the treatment sessions. You can see that we can argue that some of the dose that we were going to give is more conformal to the volume by considering the changes that happen during that fraction, that particular fraction. But all of this needs to happen within the same treatment session. And there are time frames in the order of an hour to a couple of hours to do that. So still, it is not immediate. We compare it to a traditional treatment. We can deliver the dose and do the image in about 20 minutes. The involvement of online adaptation makes, and it's going to make the treatment longer. So that's something that needs to be considered. And finally, this is an interesting thing. In 2007, there were two physicists talking about, okay, why don't we try to use cancer on biology to see and treat multiple tumors at the same time? And I can tell you that this really happened between two physicists, and they came up with this idea of using a PET and a ConFime CT and a LINAC all together in the same device to come up with this system called the reflection. So the idea of this is that you can actually visualize, adapt, and target all of those systems using the PET CT image of that specific day. So for treating multiple lesions, especially for oligometastasis and things like that, this is a technology that might produce plans that are optimally designed for those specific patients. And they say that this is powered by physics. So kudos to all of you that are studying medical physics, because some of you are the ones that are going to come up with ideas like this one. So with that, I conclude the adaptation and respond, and I hope I was able to communicate to you that we have made progress also in that space, and we are exploring technologies to actually do all of these circle that you see here during a treatment session. And there are still technological questions that we need to address, but I think there has been quite a few progress on that space. One thing that is important to emphasize, and I want to make the point, is that these technologies that I was describing, you might think, well, those are super expensive, and how do we improve equity in terms of access to adaptive treatments if we don't have the means to give some just basic radiation? And I think that's an important question to ask, because some of these technologies that are invented now are very expensive. So it prompts the question about equity in terms of access to those technologies. So that's a question that Paul Keel tried to address in this publication, and tried to show that using current treatment modalities like a LINAC, there is a possibility of using adaptive workflows in a little bit different way, but what he wants to make the point is that we might be able to achieve similar results of the adaptation using current technologies, rather than spending a lot of money in fancy technologies. So I just want to emphasize that in the concept of online adaptation, there are things that we can use with current technologies to do that process. Obviously, there are things that need to be changed. However, Paul Keel has been trying to address that question and trying to improve access by understanding what can we do with current technologies that we have to improve real-time adaptation. And this is just an example of some of the things that he's been developing with his team to do adaptation of radiotherapy process for prostate cancer. So it's just an interesting concept on trying to see, okay, well, yeah, this is very, very nice about all these technologies, but can we improve access to patients of those technologies? And the question is no. Some of those technologies are very expensive and sometimes difficult to get. And what if we try to develop workflows in which we can use current technologies to achieve similar or the same things? Oh, very good question, so Camila. So why are the equipment used in radiotherapy so expensive, and how to make them more accessible? Yeah, I think that is the question. And that's one of the things that, as you can imagine, the MR technology is the MR technology that I'm showing here. Just because you have an MR, this makes the whole process much more complex and difficult. And an MR on itself is an expensive imaging system. When you couple an MR with a LINAC, it makes it even more expensive. So the way and the technology around this is just so complex. And granted that it's giving us and allowing us to get information that we cannot do any other way. However, is this the way to go into making accessible to more patients? So I think the idea of Paul Keel is to say, okay, well, there are things that we are learning from these MR technologies and this PET-CT in terms of adaptation. Can we bring these ideas and concepts to current technologies that are more easily accessible, and actually have an incremental step in terms of online adaptation using current technology? So I think that's the idea that some researchers are exploring, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention, so you can think about technologies not just from the point of view of, okay, this is super cool and it provides this level of progression, but how can we make some of those technologies more accessible to treat patients all around the planet? And I can tell you that radiotherapy on itself, even this type of delivery systems is expensive. So I think one area that we need to continue thinking in radiation therapy is how can we make technologies that are more accessible so more people can benefit from them. So that's just a point that I wanted to bring to all of you, since, again, some of you are going to be the medical physicists of the future, and I hope that maybe some of you will have some of those ideas when thinking about how to improve cancer care across not just Brazil, but across the world. So hopefully I was able to convey that we have done progress and in many of the domains of image guidance, from therapy design to interventions during treatment to monitoring and adapting during the treatment. So I want you to think about the equity question as we develop new technologies. And with that, I just be open for questions, and I would like to thank everybody again for joining. And I hope that you were able to learn about image guidance and hopefully motivate you to continue in this field, because there are so many opportunities that to improve many aspects of how we deliver care during the radiation therapy process. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think you are muted, Guillermo.
Okay. I did the same thing my friend did the other day. Well, thank you first. And personally, I have a question. I mean, what are some of the limitations of the IGRT technology?
Limitations.
Yeah.
So I think one of the limitations is and I think it's just because it's just we are breeding is what Renato was saying. I think motion management is a limitation. When you are taking an image of something that is moving, you have artifacts, and new technologies are coming to do this assessment of this acquisition a little bit faster, to try to reduce motion. But I can see that one of the limitations is how to address motion management. Things that we need to treat, for example, on the brain, are very good because the head is not moving and hopefully the brain is not jumping around. So we can achieve very good imaging to do, for example, brain SRS treatments. As you are trying to go into the abdomen, there are limitations on how well we can visualize some of those targets. However, with the inclusion of, again, fancy technologies like MR, there is being progression in terms of that. But I can tell you that the limitation is on the intrinsic limitation of the image that you are using, of the image technology that you are using. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Let's see. The dose uses in radiation depends on patient weight. The doses of radiation therapy depends on patient weight. Not necessarily. I think what I can say is the body. Obviously, the larger the body is, the more dose we need to do in order to get deeper. So I might not say that it's related to weight. It's more to body anatomy and surrounding tissue. So, however, there are new technologies that are able to distribute the dose across the whole volume in a way that we're able to minimize, to increase the dose to the target and trying to keep the other doses not as high. There are other techniques like using higher energies that are also useful to reduce patient overall dose. And we can talk about proton therapy, which uses other type of modality to reduce even more dose, which I didn't talk too much about that because that's another one of those expensive technologies. But however, there are groups trying to make this also accessible with other type of delivery systems. So does that answer your question? I hope it does. Any other questions?
Oh yes. Can machine learning
be used to improve accuracy in IGRT? Is it being used right now? A very good question. I think one of the things that we have used for image guidance, and I'm talking about localization of the target during diffraction, is just the use of simple similarity metrics. In other words, you just take an image, take another image, and then you can calculate how well those images are aligning. The value of machine learning, I think, can be used more for this section of adaptation. So let's imagine that you have this new image and you wanna change the contours in a way that they adapt to the new image of the day. So you can have a much better assessment of those volume because you can move those contours around. Machine learning, I think, is being used and AI to do those deformations in order to get a better assessment of the dose of the day. I hope that answered the question. In the image guidance concept, I think it's more used on this adaptation space rather than just on the image localization. Another area that machine learning is being used also is on the target at delineation and actually diagnosis, where you can try to use machine learning to better localize a tumor and better do the contouring of the tumor as well as organoids. That's new, but that's the area where also machine learning has been used.
Okay, do we have more questions? I don't think so. I just want to see if I understand the answer. So machine learning is being used more in radiation treatment? No, I mean treatment planning than the treatment itself, right?
Say that again, Jerome. I didn't follow.
Is machine learning being used more in treatment planning than the treatment itself?
Yes, I think that's exactly during the treatment planning processes where you need to do the delineation. You need to actually better and the machine learning is to make this process more efficient and more consistent. You can say, well, a physician is the one still doing the delineation. So, but what machine learning is bringing is, okay, can I actually do that more consistently, or provide more information to the physician to actually do the delineation better? So I think that is when machine learning is playing a more important role. And I can say that even imagine that you're going to treat this patient and you have information from multiple images, multiple diagnoses, multiple other specific patient-specific issues. Can we use machine learning to bring all of this information together and narrow it down the process of the patient, the plan to treat this patient that is more targeted to this specific patient? I think machine learning and AI will help us to understand how we can manage all of that information to better target the treatment to a specific patient need. I think that is when it is going to shine.
Well, okay, thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for the presentation. It was really insightful. And thank you everybody for watching. Muito obrigado. E como não tem mais perguntas, eu vou encerrar o dia de hoje. Não esqueçam que amanhã, 5h30, a gente volta aqui com a palestra de um dos nossos patrocinadores. Depois a gente segue o dia. Tchau, boa noite, muito obrigado. Thank you again, Luis.
Have a good night. Ciao. Thank you very much.
Tchau.